Okay, should be live. Good evening, trusted source, Preston B. Hope I'm coming through loud and clear. Please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. Comment in the chat any questions. And, if you have any comments on this video, comment them down below. I will try and get to them eventually. Sometimes I'm a bit slow with the comments, but I will answer or try to answer everything that is in the live chat if you put that in there. Tonight is going to be a very interesting stream, I think, and we are going to discuss something that is not often enough discussed within a topic that is very, much linked to the people who we're going to speak about, or who are in the conversation that we're going to speak about, which is Salvatore Pais and Jay Anderson from Project Unity YouTube channel. They had a discussion. I think that this is the second stream that I've ever seen Salvatore Pais on. The only other one that YouTube channel that I've ever seen him do interviews on before this is Kurt Munkel's Theories of Everything YouTube channel. I highly recommend you watch Kurt's interviews with Sal as well. I've done streams on them in the past as well. I think he might have done two, maybe one, but at least one. And I have done a stream on at least one. And it was a great stream as well. So I expect this one to be too. We're going to continue on a topic that I kind of focused on regarding what he spoke about in his discussion with Kurt, which is not actually on so much UFOs, but on the nature of the physics that is relevant to his work, and probably also to UFOs as well. But there is not much discussion as to the nature of our reality in the way that we're going to discuss it today in the UFO topic. There is to some degree, but we're going to touch on it. They had a great talk. It is linked below. I highly recommend that you watch their entire discussion. It was about an hour and a half. Jay, his YouTube channel, Project Unity, focuses on the UFO phenomenon, and it is a great YouTube channel. I don't listen all that often, but sometimes when I do, and whenever I do, it's very good. He's definitely has a talent for interviewing, and has some great interviews on there. So highly recommend checking that out. Link is below to their full discussion, like I said. Also, I did an interview recently with the CTMU Singularity YouTube channel, and there is a link below to that. I think that was about a week or two ago, and it was a great talk. It was a long one, so grab a drink and a snack, as Isaac Arthur likes to say, if you know his YouTube channel. That is a great one as well, Isaac Arthur's YouTube channel. But he's always telling people grab a drink and a snack, and his videos are not nearly as long as mine. So maybe grab a meal and a snack. But it was a very good talk, and open to going back on there anytime. So this is the CTMU Singularity YouTube channel, and here is my interview, Reality Principle. So check it out. Like I said, link is below. And this is the channel that we're going to be talking about. This is Project Unity YouTube channel. It is run by Jay Anderson, I believe his last name is. And like I said, he has great interviews on here with so many different people on so many different topics. I think that, as I've said last week, if you didn't see my stream last week, the UFO topic is an extremely frustrating and extremely difficult topic to get into. It is filled with so much contradictory or seemingly contradictory narratives, and it is definitely, no matter what is the truth, stems from classified projects, and also comes with a lot of disinformation that comes from the intelligence community over the decades, at least. Even if it's not very active now, it probably is. It certainly has been in the past, and so when you combine that with the stigma that's been developed and the lack of kind of I don't know, disclosure, you could say, that it's just a very tough topic to navigate. And Jay's channel does so very, very well, I think. And even though I tend to, differ on some opinions that he has on some things, I think he does a great job with navigating the topic extremely well, and I highly recommend subscribing to his channel if you're interested in that. Him and Richard Dolan are probably my two favorite people on this topic, just because of how they go about it, not because I believe, that what they believe to be true is true. It's too complicated a topic to suggest who has the truth and who doesn't. But I try and look for people who navigate the topic in a responsible way, and I think that Jay's channel definitely does that. So, like I said, please hit the like button, comment any questions in the chat. We are going to get into it. I was just watching one of your videos, didn't expect to catch one of your lives. Welcome, Tech Padawan. I like that name, that's cool. Loud and clear, good. Hi, says Paulina. Hi, that is my wife. Thank you to her for checking the chat. Jacques Vallée's got the best theory I've heard on it. Jacques Vallée is very interesting to listen to it as well. I loved his interview with Kirchai Mungel. And, he has said some fascinating stories that, make a lot of sense. I mean, a theory based on consciousness. Cool. Yeah, we're going to talk about theories based on consciousness tonight, because it is very relevant to this stream that we're going to be focusing on. This is it. A deep talk with a high-level U.S. Navy aerospace engineer, Salvatore Pais. Their discussion was on intuitive science, the conscious universe, and the philosophy of physics. And also on his theories, the Pais effect. So this is Salvatore Pais. This right here is, I believe this is his patent. So right here, go to patents. I don't even know how to pronounce that, and I'm not going to try. High temperature superconductors, high frequency gravitational wave generator. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. Induced room temperature superconductor, mass reduction device, inertial mass reduction device, high frequency gravitational wave generator. And his patents are famous because they were branded as the UFO patents, and they were filed by the Navy, and they are filled with images like this. And it is an attempt, from what I understand, to right here, a craft using an inertial mass reduction device comprises of an inner resonant cavity wall, an outer resonant cavity, and in microwave emitters, the electronically charged outer resonant cavity wall and the electrically insulated inner resonant cavity wall form a resonant cavity. The microwave emitters create a high-frequency electromagnetic waves throughout the resonant cavity, causing the resonant cavity to vibrate in an accelerated mode and create a local polarized vacuum outside of the outer resonant cavity. I'm guessing that was going to say wall, but it says all. But basically, this is very similar sounding to what people term the TR3B, which is a supposedly top secret inertial mass reduction aircraft that is super classified. And there's a lot of stuff going on with whistleblowers in the UFO field right now, and that has also been linked to a lot of whistleblowers regarding kind of beyond next-gen technology that is being hidden from the public regarding anti-gravity or electrogravitic or inertial mass reduction, type of tech. I do not know if this is true. I've heard Eric Weinstein talk about it, and I've heard Stephen Greer talk about it, and I've heard plenty of others talk about it. It's very possible, but I don't know. And I'm more interested in that than I am whether or not, like where, the UFOs are from that are not human. I'm more interested in the human ones, if we do indeed have this tech. So it's interesting, though, that the Navy would file these patents. I'm not going to get too into that tonight because I did do another stream on it, and I highly suggest watching that. I get into it a bit more there, but it almost seems like it would be disinformation, because why publish a patent on something like this? Who are you worried about stealing it? I don't know. Unless it itself is disinformation for like China or something. But there does seem to be some type of disclosure happening, whether it is, sanctioned or not, or mixture, or if it's disinformation, who knows. But there's a lot of stuff coming out right now regarding beyond next-gen tech, or, basically anti-gravity tech. I don't like that term, but let's just use it because everybody knows what I mean. And so that is how Salvatore Pais got known. Like I said, he's only done a couple interviews, and one of them was at least with Kurt Mungle. So this is the first clip. And this is him talking about the Navy and academia ignoring his Pais effect, as he calls it. But he is an engineer employed by the U.S. Navy, and I believe also Space Force.
Indifferent to it. The Navy's not doing absolutely anything about it, as far as I know, and so it's in limbo, as they say.
Can you give people just a little bit of a background about yourself and your career history? Because not that many people outside of the kind of alternative propulsion or even the UFO community are familiar with who you are. So it'd be good to get anyone who might not know just a little bit of a background on your career history and how it ended up with these technologies being proposed to the US Navy.
Well, let me start with origins. I was born in Romania, Bucharest, Romania, as a matter of fact. So I'm of Romanian origin. You can call me American apple pie made in Romanian. So, still tastes great, as they say. As far as these so-called the Navy UFO patents, that's what I spoke to Brett Pinney about it, and that's I believe this was more of a popularizing role that the Drive, the Warzone did. In a way, by calling them that, they have made sure that no physicist will ever touch this with a 23-foot pole, unfortunately, which is a bad thing. Kurt Mungle tried to introduce me to some physicists, especially one that I had a podcast with. He's very well known at Brown University, also very well known in the physics community. That didn't seem to go anywhere, though, even though I tried to make it go somewhere, and so did Kurt. So thank you very much to Kurt for doing that. This whole thing started, I was part of a naval innovative science and engineering project, a proposal. This thing came to my mind when I saw the heady side, the 4 equations with 4 unknowns. They're derived from Maxwell's equations. As you well know, the Maxwell equations, the original equations are written in quaternion form, and there are 20 equations, 20 unknowns, extremely hard, extremely difficult to solve. However, Oliver Heaviside, also Josiah Gibbs, both of them are your compatriots, as a matter of fact, both of them British. They were able to derive 4 equations with 4 unknowns. It's called the Heaviside version of Maxwell's equations. Those are the Maxwell equations that physicists use nowadays.
I want to get into the superforce and the Pais effect theory, and these are very important parts of what you're trying to propose as essentially, I would say, a unified field theory with the superforce proposal. So I would like to get into that with you, but I do want to keep on the patents for a minute, just because, as you said, with the reporting in the Drive and then being dubbed as the UFO patents, this might have created a bit of a stigma around the proposals you were giving. But the US Navy was definitely at least taking it seriously, and I think it was because of these highly exotic proposals that they were dubbed as UFO patents, because you included gravitational wave generator, inertial mass reduction device, plasma compression fusion systems. These are all very exotic proposals for beyond next generation energy and propulsion technology. And you even had the proposal for a hybrid underwater aerospace vehicle that could operate in oceans, atmosphere, the vacuum of space. And these are basically the same capabilities that have been attributed to UFOs by US Navy operators and many others over the years. So I guess the big question is, can you build that stuff, Sal?
Don't forget the room temperature superconductor.
And the room temperature superconductor, yes.
This is one thing a lot of people have not been paying close attention to. However, Dr. Viktor Lakhno of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and also a member of the Keldysh Research Center, wrote a paper, an archive paper in 2019 titled The Way from High to Room Temperature Superconductivity. And in it, reference 10, and also the final paragraphs of this paper, basically say that there is a possibility that this room temperature superconductor could work. This is not based on a chemical superconductor, so it has nothing to do with the materials that superconductivity is generated from. It's really an active physical superconductor. He uses something called the bipolar mechanism, but I will not go there. It's heavy physics. It's condensed metaphysics and then some exponential power. The best way to describe it, he really surprised me by actually saying that he summarizes it so well. He basically says, Pais uses a alternating magnetic field to disrupt the surface superconductive material and thereby form something called a Bose-Einstein condensate. Really, you can think of it as the macroscopic quantum coherent wave. So everything moving as if it was one entity. And then he says something very interesting. He says, and then he uses an alternating current to move the condensate. That's exactly what's happening. When you
Fascinating.
closely, he really hit the nail on the head. And I'm amazed that no one is trying to actually build a room temperature superconductor.
No one's trying, at least in the that's publicly acknowledged, maybe. But so that is kind of a background on him, and I will say this for those who watch his interview with Kurt or with Jay, he is extremely just well versed in some serious math, and it's very hard to follow. And I will admit I was just lost at certain points. But I understand the philosophy behind what he's talking about, and that is where we're going to focus, because my focus in the last stream that I talked about regarding him, which was the one he did with Kurt Mongol, was on something that he called the superforce. That was where I focused, and in it he said that he referenced Isaac Newton, I believe, and he said, I think it was Isaac Newton. It might have been someone else. I forgot, but it's in there. It's in that podcast where he talks about the superforce and that he is proposing exists, and how it is the unifying force of all other forces, and is basically sentient. And that's what he focused on. And if you follow this channel, then you know that my work is called Sentient Singularity Theory. You can check it out on sentientsingularity.com. Overview, models, writings. Here's the abstract for the paper I'm writing. There's visual summary. There's just a number of things on here that can get you started. There's and then I am also going to be releasing a paper fairly soon. So I actually started making some serious progress on that again. So we will discuss that. Like I said, soon. But this idea that he has of this super force, this unifying force, and he is one that it has a nature that is not discussed enough in physics, which is that of sentience. And we're going to get into that right now. We're going to watch next clip. I don't want to focus on UFOs too much tonight because we just did a whole stream on it, but here. Where is it? Here. Let's just look at this, actually. This is just him summing his Pais effect.
All right, here goes. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. The Pais effect is really the generation of extremely high energy densities produced by accelerated oscillation of a non-equilibrium plasma. That is another way, and I think a very crucial way of stating the Pais effect. when you look into the oscillation of a plasma, especially one that goes at the plasma oscillation frequency, and anyone that is in plasma physics will realize what that omega square is all about, you can get extremely high energy densities by vibrating a non-equilibrium plasma at its oscillation frequency. Let's just leave it at that. I cannot say more than that. That maybe is too much. But it has to be done under certain conditions. The whole idea being we're dealing with nonlinearities. Nonlinearities have always spoken to energy amplification. All you have to do is look back to the work of Ilya Prigogine, circa 1973. I call it the Prigogine effect. It's very interesting how seemingly chaotic structures can self-organize based on a triad of criteria, let's call it. In a medium that's nonlinear, say the plasma, if you introduce a constant or constantly driven energy flux, and then
Okay, so there's going to be a few themes that he discusses tonight. And I will say for the record, I think, just because I think that the Navy is involved in some kind of, disinformation, because they always are, that's their job, in some ways, that doesn't mean that I think that Sal is lying. I don't think Sal is lying. I think Sal is telling us things about his work that are true and that should be looked at. I don't know how much he can say or can't say, or how if he needs to change anything, while he's speaking about it publicly. I'm not sure. I haven't spoken to him personally, but I will say that his general ideas about this super force that is behind every other phenomenon that we see in physics and unifies the forces and things like that, and this triadic structure to his cosmology, I guess you could say, as he just stated, and he'll get more into, is correct. It's very consistent with my theory, with my work, and his description of the nature of the universe, of the cosmos, is consistent with my work as well. And it is for this reason that his discussions are extremely interesting to me, because he doesn't speak that much about anti-gravity stuff in a way that most people can understand, including myself. But he does speak a lot about the context of his work. And this is very important because, as I've stated before many times on this channel, physics is moving in a direction that is not being acknowledged by the mainstream, even though it is being participated in by the mainstream of physics. And that is the direction of the physics of consciousness, or sentience, and which is metaphysics. And in my Theories of Everything, the how-to guide video that I did for Kirchheim-Mungel's Pace 1 contest, I highly suggest watching that. It's one of my better ones, and it's one of my shorter ones. It discusses how we can get at the base nature of reality, and how you can formulate a fundamental foundation by which to build a physics framework. And not just a physics framework, but a chemistry framework and a biology framework and even a political and economic and social framework. So, but he discusses that is related to this Pais effect that he's famous for pushing out, this super force that is the contextualizer of his work. And it is important to focus on the context, the philosophical context of the theories that is being put out by these physicists that are proposing new ideas, not just the math, not just the specific theory that is within the bounds of physics or mathematics, but the philosophical context of their work. And Salvatore says in this interview, actually, he says something that I just loved, is he said, physics without philosophy is like a seed without water. And this is that specific clip, but where is it? Here, where is it? Okay, right here. I will explain why this is so important.
The greatest credit of all time, and to call me another Tesla's brother, I'll put it this way. If I was wearing a hat, I would tip it to you, sir. Physics without philosophy
Yes.
is like a seed without water. Toothless. Unbelievable that a lot of physicists have just let philosophy, they almost make fun of it. I think one person that's still a great physicist, in my opinion, Carlo Rovelli, he still has that in him. He is also a great philosopher. I admire that man deeply. As I do Abba Ashtekar, he's another great one. You know, this idea of quantum balance, it speaks to the superforce. Let me just say one thing. Well, I'll say many things if you let me, but this is very interesting. I believe there's almost like a trifecta of creation going on here. There's this.
Okay, we're going to get to that in a minute. But, okay, so this superforce that is kind of the foundation of his work is implies a specific has specific philosophical implications about the nature of reality, and we must pay attention to that stuff. When you listen to Eric Weinstein and he proposes geometric unity, and you look at his equations and then you read his paper, you have to also pay attention to the things that he has said in podcasts about the philosophy behind his cosmology. The context that is his cosmology is the context of geometric unity. The context of the Pais effect and the superforce is this. The context of the Pais effect is the superforce, or the foundation of it, and this superforce has philosophical implications that contextualize Salvatore Pais's work, and you have to always remember that you cannot separate philosophy from physics. And there is a bridge between philosophy and physics, and that is called metaphysics. And we'll get to that because he speaks on it here as well. But when he says physics without philosophy is fruitless, it's a seed without water, it's fruitless. This is so incredibly true, and you can see this in mainstream physics today when you look at things like string theory. When they say it's, the universe is, fundamentally strings that are vibrating in 11-dimensional hyperspace, or whatever it is that they're saying these days, depending on who you ask. But that is not context. That is a description of the nature of some structures, but it is not the context. Like, strings of what? Inside of what? Like, what are these dimensions and why are they there? These 11 dimensions. What are they? Like, this is stuff that is not in string theory. I actually do think that a lot of the structures that are being derived and mapped in string theory, like the Calabi-Yau manifold and things like that, and I'm not a string theory expert, but I've looked into it more than most people, and I do think that these structures are real structures, but there's no context to what they are. What is a Calabi-Yau manifold? I think it is. I think I know what it is, but my sentient singularity theory provides a proposed framework for what that is, and a description that isn't just an equation, which doesn't tell us anything. It might tell us some things about, order, its order and its process, but it doesn't tell us the context of this process that's going on. It describes a process, but it doesn't tell us the context of the process. And if you don't know the context of a process, then you don't know what's really happening with this process, which means you don't really know what it is. And so you have to have these things all together linked. This is in my Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide. I talk about this, and I talked about how Eric Weinstein had stated once in an interview that, and I do disagree with him on this, even though I do think that his geometric unity theory is likely a fruitful, pursuit of physics. I think it's where we should be paying more attention to it than we are in the mainstream. And I think that he's right about a lot of things. When he has stated before that a fundamental theory or a theory of everything doesn't need to include an origin of the universe, and it doesn't need to be self-contained and follow its own patterns and things like that. And maybe that's true of what geometric unity is, which is a more fundamental theory than if we assume it's accurate, which I think that we should assume that it's accurate enough to look into and take seriously. And I would say probably is more. It's probably better direction than string theory at this point. When he proposes it, he just starts it with like, let us begin with a four-dimensional manifold. Like that's what in the paper that he puts forward. Where is that? Here. Oh man, it's not coming up. But if you go and you read it, okay, here it is actually. You go and you read the first draft of GU, and it starts with, what really interests me is whether God had any choice in the creation of the world. That's such a good question. But then it says, in the beginning, we will let X4 be a four-dimensional C to the power of infinity manifold with a chosen orientation and a unique spin structure. Okay, how did we get here? What is this four-dimensional manifold? Like, what is that? I understand that, space-time... Sorry if you hear my dog, but she's yawning. But I understand that space-time is currently considered to be four-dimensional, and yes, that's a 4D manifold. But like we're looking for something more fundamental, so I don't know what the context is of what he is stating, and I don't even think that we have the context understood of what is space-time. Maybe I think we have one side of that structure mapped, not the other side, and these two sides contextualize each other, so we would need that. But that's part of a model in my work. But this superforce, though, that contextualizes Salvatore Pais's work has a specific nature to it that is very important to acknowledge and assume, even if you don't believe it, for the sake of argument, if you're going to take this seriously. If you go and you try and use somebody's equations to build some technology, and you don't take the philosophical context in which those equations make sense into consideration, then you can't make use of those equations properly. You just can't. And I think this is what has happened with physics, though. Everything is outside context, and I think that's because we are wrong about the nature of the of our reality, and that has led to a complete standstill in advancing our understanding of fundamental physics. And so, while geometric unity is a fundamental physics theory, I don't think that he had stated that you don't need to propose an origin. I don't think that that's really true. I don't think that he could even derive geometric unity without proposing an origin, at least for the sake of argument, even if he's not confident about it, which he should be fairly confident if he's confident about geometric unity, which is contextualized within a specific context. But same thing with the Pais effect. You should be confident about the context of your theory, of your work. And so this is, speaking of equations, this is the equation for the superforce, according to Salvatore Pais.
I will be the hands-out vein to Enrico Fermi. It's a long story, and how hands-out veins for magneto hydrodynamics were actually he was derided at every turn, until one day in a conference, the great Enrico Fermi said, "I see it," and soon followed hands-out veins. How should I say, meteoric rise. Until that point, I'm still hoping one day somebody will realize. And why not the superforce? It's so beautiful because it's, again, Occam's razor, simplicity and minimalism. The very formula of it, and I know, don't just stick with formulas, but it is such a beautiful formula. It's almost on par with equal mc squared. C to the fourth divided by g. c to the fourth, the very essence of.
Okay. Okay, so this is the equation for the superforce. And it's interesting that it's c to the fourth, whereas like geometric unity says, let us, in the beginning we will let x4, be a four-dimensional c to the power of infinity manifold. So that's very interesting. So, and this is very much in alignment with sentient singularity theory, which starts with four primary perspectives that are interconnected and defining of each other, such that one of if you have one of them, then you also have all the other three as well. So they're simultaneous perspectives that manifest, which is inside, outside, separate, and oneness. If you know what is inside of you, you know what is outside of you. If you know, or you would understand what is outside of you. If you understand what is separate from you, then you would understand what is one with you. So, but if we look at here, we've got x4, what was it? Hold on. Right here. We have x4 is equal to a four-dimensional c to the power of infinity manifold. And then you have, what was the Pais effect is c, I believe it was c divided by 4. Something like that. Let me see. Hold on. Let's look.
Four divided by big G.
C to the fourth. Okay. C to the fourth. Divided by a big G. Interesting. So that's these equations. And sentient singularity theory starts with this, just for reference. Basically, these four primary perspectives that are, defining of each other. Go here and look right here. So outside is separate from oneness, inside is separate and oneness. Oneness is outside and inside of separateness. Separate is inside or outside of oneness. So they're co-defining. So each one is defined by the other. So basically, if you have one, then you have the other. So it's this kind of entangled, simultaneous four-dimensional manifold that it is kind of the foundation of sentient singularity theory, which is, there's a model of it. But very different type of manner of work than what is common in academia. But so I'm not I have as fluent as if I went to school for this stuff, so I've had to go and really look at it. But c to the fourth divided by big G. So c is, I believe that is the speed of light, which is really the speed of causality. And what that means is it's the fastest that anything can happen. It's not like, it's not the speed of light. It's the speed of causality, which is different. It appears to be the speed of light, but it's not just the speed of light. It is the fastest that anything can happen. It's not the fastest that you can move, in like a spaceship, or it's not alone, and it's not just the speed of light. It is the fastest that anything can happen. It's the speed at which change is observed to occur within a relativistic context. That is what it is. And so the superforce's apparent equation is c to the fourth divided by g. And then, you have E equals mc squared as well, which also makes use of the same variable. But I mean, all these equations are going to end up being connected if they, end up being correct. And I think that that's interesting that he provided an equation that's something very specific. And I think that the fact that he has these quantities down of like, the speed of causality, to the fourth divided by big G, like these quantities and structure does seem to make sense. That doesn't mean it's correct. I'm not saying that that equation is correct. I don't know. But I'm just saying it looks like what I would think an equation like that could look like. It's got the right attributes. That I can tell. And that is cool that he did that. I mean, I don't know what would go into testing this. And, Sentient Singularity theory, my work but the eventual goal of my work is an experiment that I will propose later this year. But and it seems like he has engineering applications, and I'm sure GU does as well, as Eric has stated. Basically escaping the bounds of the constraints of space-time, and escaping relativity in how we travel. I don't know exactly the details of it because he hasn't been super specific, but like these are the ways in which these things need to be tested. I don't really foresee that anybody will really I don't think the mainstream will take this stuff seriously until that stuff starts. I think that is, if you're waiting to convince people based on your equations, you're not going to convince the right people, usually. So, but I think that this is fascinating that he has this stuff here, and I'm putting some crossover between my work and this guy's work and Eric Weinstein's work. I'll talk about Donald Hoffman and others and as well. I could reference so many people. Irwin's work seems to align with this to some degree. So does, like I said, Donald Hoffman and I'm sure Chris Langan and Carl Friston as well, probably. So there's so much crossover. Physics is taking a direction, Wolfram as well, that is very interesting, and it's headed towards the physics of quote-unquote consciousness. And that's what we're going to get into here. Because that was what Salvatore Pais had said was essentially the context of his work. So, getting into this next clip is his triadic cosmology, which we will get into why he's right in that is how it would manifest. The actions of creation within the cosmos would be triadic. So,
the very essence of everything and all, the speed of light, the very structure that unites us all, the quantum vacuum, that is representative of the quantum vacuum, highly nonlinear to the fourth power, divided by what? The universal gravitational constant, Newton's constant, big G. And go bigger than big G, even though it's extremely small. In the denominator, it becomes an incredible amplifier, adding to that C to the fourth effect. I'm just saying, you have to see the beauty of that formula. And not only that superforce exists at every point in space and time, meaning what? Quantum entanglement, we are all one. That's what the superforce proves. Scientists have looked into the notion of the superforce to understand its implications. It's huge. It comes right out of the Schrodinger equation, the very foundation of quantum mechanics. And because it's in the Schrodinger equation, it must also be in the Dirac equation. What's the Dirac equation? But Schrodinger equation plus special relativity of Einstein. You see what I'm saying? It's there, man. They just have to believe, to let go of their inhibition, and just look at the beauty of this formalism. And not only that, it's not just abstract mathematical acrobatics. It's not this humongous equation that just keeps on going. It's simple.
Funny place to pause there. But here is him talking about his triadic cosmology.
Unbelievable that a lot of physicists have just let philosophy, they almost make fun of it. I think one person that's still a great physicist, in my opinion, Carlo Rovelli, he still has that in him. He is also a great philosopher. I admire that man deeply. As I do Abai Ashtekar, he's another great one. You know, this idea of quantum bounds, it speaks to the superforce. Let me just say one thing. Well, I'll say many things if you let me, but this is very interesting. I believe there's almost like a trifecta of creation going on here. There's the superforce leading to the super bang, leading to super intelligence. Have you ever questioned why in our brain is 100 billion neurons, on the order of 100 billion neurons, and in the observable universe, there happens to be what? On the order of 100 billion galaxies. And what did Anthony Peratt, the great Anthony Peratt, say about the universe being almost what?
Almost like a giant thought instead of a giant machine.
We are talking about a super sentience here, sir.
Yeah.
We are part of something so beautiful and so great, and that's why we must come together. We really are. All is one. Yet.
Okay, so existence is a singularity of sentience, according to Salvatore Pais. It is a super sentience that is this super force that is essentially a sentient being. It means like the universe is a sentient being, and we are nodes in its mind, essentially. We are strings of information in its thoughts, and that is what he is stating. That is accurate according to my work, and I love that I'm seeing more and more people use this term sentient instead of just conscious. Like, consciousness is such a vague word at this point, and it's got so much attached to it that that just baggage at this point. But sentience is more specific, and you know, if somebody says, "What do you mean by it's conscious?" It's like, it's sentient. Okay, what does that mean? It means something very specific. It means it's self-aware and it has feelings. Okay, so that is the definition of sentience. I don't know if that's exactly how he's using it here, but I think it is, and that is the objective definition. So I would assume that that's how he's using it. And you know, Chris Langan said this as well. Eric Weinstein, I think, said you start with something almost sentient but not quite sentient in his work. But you know, I disagree with that. I think you start with something sentient, but still in that direction. Then we have Donald Hoffman's work, which is conscious agent theory. And in the last interview that Salvatore Pais did with Kirchheim Mungel, he said that he was quoting, I think it was Isaac Newton, but it might not have been. Let me see here. Who was the smartest person to live? Might have been Isaac Newton. Forgot, but you can go look it up. But it's one of those guys. And he said, he was quoting him, and he said, what if gravity is the result of an agent, like a conscious agent, like conscious agent theory from Donald Hoffman? And what if that is what gravity is? It's a conscious action, like me picking this up and moving every single cell in my body is now, they are now moving, and they can't help it. And they're also usually spinning, because the only axis in which I can move is around myself, So ultimately, everything would be spinning. Every movement, if you kind of summed all the movements and got the average of direction and every trajectory, it would all be spinning, because you can only move around yourself. And this is exactly what I think gravity is. And when he says big G, it's interesting that big G, it's a G. That why is gravity also with a G? I think that is, there's no such thing as randomness. So, if you believe that that's just a random coincidence, this is not your channel. But if you believe I'm misinterpreting that, then that's fine. But there is a lot of synchronicity that exists, or I call it extra arithmetic symmetries that exist in the cosmos, and they're not random nonsense. But when you call something big G, what is big G? So, but it's interesting that he said, we're kind of like, it appears like we're a thought in the mind of the cosmos, which we're thought in the mind of God. The universe and the multiplicity within it exists in the mind of God. And if you look at other people's work, obviously conscious agent theory from Donald Hoffman is like this, implies this. Sentient singularity theory, if you look at my writings and you see here, sentient singularity theory describes the totality of existence as a singularity of sentience that is creating additional sentient singularities within itself. Sentience is the phenomenon of feelings, sensations, and emotions. Singularity is defined as something that is one distinct unit or as something that is especially unique. Sentient singularity theory denotes a singularity as the structure that has the property of infinite oneness, such as a Mobius strip, or one being that is composed of many beings, such as a multicellular organism like you and me. Sentient singularity theory can therefore be understood to imply that everything that exists is part of a single universal sentient being that is producing an infinitely growing number of other sentient beings within itself. These additional singularities of sentience or self-aware beings are arranged into a nested quasi-periodic fractal pattern of stacked holonic structures, basically like nested Russian dolls. This pattern forms a single self-reflective knot of perception heading an assembly body that integrates multiple entangled strings of information. And it goes on with this, observes 4 primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. These 4 perspectives are interdependent and entangled, as awareness of one in them entails the awareness of all 4. So the primary perspectives enable the perception and orientation of oneself within the objective relationships that transcend beyond relativity, or supersubjective, you could say as well. If you look at this is geometric unity. That sounds very much like the Salvatore Pais, but if you look at geometric unity, we will let x4 in the beginning be a 4-dimensional c to the power of infinity manifold with a chosen orientation and unique spin structure. And if you look at, interesting, here, I think that this paper needs a lot more attention than it has received. And I'm not even mathematically literate enough to tell you everything about it. But I can tell you that I see the same quantities and arrangements in my work, many of the same. But if you look here and you get into his observation and the observerse, this right here is where maybe he put it somewhere. But this is the Wheeler, I believe it was physicist Wheeler, did a U with an eye looking at itself. You can see that here. This was the original. The universe looking at itself, observing itself, being self-aware, being a being, being sentient. And Eric's observerse, which I believe is very related to my 14 dimensions of maneuvering of space-time and time-space, essentially, which is modeled on my website. It's a double U. There's 2 U's stacked on top of each other. And it's all about, observation. I mean, there's no way that this is not about the physics of consciousness as you get more fundamental. That is what physics is. You can't get around that. I mean, if you look at the names even of the some of the particles in the standard model, like the quarks, it's like up and down and charm and strange and truth and beauty. Like, these are perspectives of a sentience. Something is up, something is down, something is strange, something is, beautiful, something is true. Like, these are things that can only be observed and understood by a sentience. And so if you get rid of that, then what's the context of a charm quark, or strange quark, or a truth quark, or a beauty quark, or even an up quark and a down quark? Us from, or related to us, but the truest thing that you can know about the nature of existence is that it is sentient, because you are sentient and you know it, and you know that that's true more than you know anything else is true. It's that you exist and you feel because you feel. That whole quote, I think it's attributed to Descartes, but I think therefore I am. That's true, but more fundamentally than even that, it's I feel, therefore I am. So you are sentient, and you know that you are sentient more than you know anything else. So there's nothing that anyone else can tell you about the universe that should trump your knowledge of that, not your belief in that, your awareness of it. You are aware that the cosmos, that reality, that the universe, that existence is, to the best of your awareness, sentient. And there's nothing else that you can know more truly and more confidently than you can know that. And science has lost touch with this. And it's not, even if you, for some reason, you have intuition that is telling you that you think that that's false, you still can't logically say that it is, because you have to prioritize first-hand information above second-hand information. And if you exist and you feel, if you are a feeling being that exists, then you cannot deny your own existence and then argue with me, because you're arguing with me. And so, there's no way around this. The universe, we must assume, is sentient. And so maybe there is a super force that is sentient. And that would make sense. This is discussed in my Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide video as well. It aligns with my work and the work of many, many others. Carl Friston, Donald Hoffman, Eric Weinstein, it seems even. It is a universe looking at itself, observing itself. It is self-aware in some way. And this is also consistent with Chris Langan and Carl Friston and so many people in these days. We cannot deny this. Science has lost it. They've literally lost it. If you aren't starting from the first principle of first principles, which is that existence is by nature fundamentally sentient, which you must assume because you are sentient and you know that that's true, more so than you know anything else to be true. Your eyes can play tricks on you, and everything else can, all your other senses can play tricks on you, and people can tell you nonsense in school, and you can get confused through, when you're looking at your equations, whatever. But you know that you exist because you feel, and you don't think you exist, you are aware of it. And because of that, we must assume that sentience is the context of everything that flows from there in science, but we literally have lost it because we can't observe it so easily, even though I think we can, but you need the right pattern to look for, and even then it's tough, or at least it seems that way right now, to deduce whether or not something is sentient as an outside observer. But we all of us know internally, intrinsically, that we are sentient. So it's self-evidently true. We don't need to test it. It's maybe the one thing you don't need to test, or one of the few things you don't need to test. But, it's like big U, not just big G, but big U, looking at itself. But this trifecta of that Pais is talking about is very interesting as well, because in my work, it shows that this would be an inevitability, and I can show you that right here. So if we look at information change, and we also are going to look at that here on theories of Every0ne. If you look here on this video that I have on my channel, it's called Classical Computing versus Quantum Computing in 1 minute, and it's more than just that, but it's very related to that. So you can see here, the goal in this, what I'm about to show you, is to change information and maintain coherence while changing it. And so what that means is you want to start with this initial matrix, 4x4 matrix in this case, but it doesn't matter with what we're going to ultimately do. And we're going to change all the information inside it. So all ones are going to change to zeros, all zeros are going to change to ones. This is the final product, this is the input. And you can go watch this, but this is kind of classical computing. Everything has to be changed 1 bit at a time in order to maintain coherence, because each cell is giving context and maintaining coherence for the ones around it. This is like general relativity, but then if we want to go into the quantum computational realm, this is what we get. Okay, that's it. Just changed everything, because now we incorporate superposition and you can maintain coherence. And what you're always going to have is you're going to have 4 perspectives, like C divided by 4. I think that's what was it that he had said earlier. For C to the power to the 4th divided by G. Okay, and then 3 actions. So this trifecta. He says creation has this trifecta nature, trifecta of attributes to it. This is because of the way that information changes and maintains coherence. So if you look at these models, which I will have in a more in-depth video, if the size of the matrix changes, so in this case it's a 4x4, you have 17 states and 16 actions. If we move to a 3x3 matrix right here, we get 10 states and 9 actions. So it's changing. It's as we decrease the information in the matrix, we're decreasing the states that are observed and the number of actions that have to be taken. And then if we move to a 2x2 matrix, then we start here, we end here. We get 5 states and 4 actions. But if we go this quantum computational route that allows for superposition, what we get is 4 states, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 actions, 1, 2, and 3. And if we bump it up to 3x3, and we go this quantum computational route, we still get 4 states, 3 actions, 1, 2, 3. And we bump it up again to 4x4 with this quantum computational route, and we get 4 states again, and 3 actions. And so no matter how large the matrix is of information that we have to change, when we allow for superposition, we get this same amount of actions, which is 3, and same amount of states that are observed of the information throughout the process of change, which is always 4. So there's this coherence to it that doesn't stop. We see this pattern everywhere. It is in the quarks, and it is in the neutrinos and the electrons, and it is in the order of operations in mathematics, and it is in the primary and secondary colors. We see this trifecta, triadic nature to things. And Eric Weinstein has stated it's actually it's a duality, with one being an imposter. My work suggests that it's 2 degrees of freedom plus an intrinsic constraint. And then there's this extrinsic constraint as well. That we see this in space-time as well. It's like past, present, future. But it's really 2 degrees of freedom, the past and the future, and then you're always in the present. You can't escape it. It's an intrinsic constraint. And then, same thing with movement. Is like forwards, backwards, and your current location. That's a trifecta, but it's really 2 degrees of freedom forwards and backwards, and plus an intrinsic constraint, which is your current location. So, but this triadic, structure is apparent. This triality is apparent, and you see this even in religion. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. You see it in Judaism as well, even with the 10 Sephirot. In Kabbalah, you can see that which are the attributes of a mind. They say it's the mind of God. It's like a decision tree of emotions, or of the different attributes of sentience. But there is a triadic nature to the way that information is structured as well. So this is something that can be observed everywhere, and it does support what Salvatore Pais is saying. But let's get back to his clip explaining it. But he says it's a super force, God, that leads to a super bang, creation, which leads to a super intelligence, which is like sentient creation. And it's like creation coming to sentience. And I think, and that makes sense. That is consistent with my work, and seems consistent with even the cosmology of other more fundamental theories that I've listed already throughout the stream. But
goes back to I believe what was the name? Trismegistus?
Yeah, Hermes Trismegistus, and the Hermetic principles, and as above, so below, microcosm and macrocosm. Yeah.
Right now.
Literally got the staff of Hermes on my arm right there, man.
Yes. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. I resonate a lot with the philosophical principles of Hermeticism and the teachings of Hermes. And it's again, like you said, this teaching ultimately is that we are one. We're all one. Individuals having an individual experience, but ultimately we are a singular entity, which I'm still trying to understand what that really means, because that's a hard thing for a human being to comprehend. I mean, it's like trying to comprehend infinity.
Maybe that's why we keep on coming back.
So I will say this. People say this a lot, like trying to comprehend infinity. Can we comprehend infinity? The reason why it's tough to comprehend infinity is because you're thinking about it wrong. Most people think about infinity when they're like thinking about it in this context of, oh, it's so hard to comprehend infinity. They're thinking about it as a static thing to try and comprehend that is endless. But that's not what infinity is. Infinity is infinite growth, which is really endless growth. And I think that the objective definition of it kind of has to be growth that has a beginning but no end. Whereas like eternity is like no beginning and no end. Infinity is like with a beginning and no end. And then finiteness is with a beginning and with an end. And so there's that trifecta again of information generation, essentially, that is probably it speaks to Salvatore Pais's philosophical context and that he is assuming of the superforce, and also to the kind of trifecta of creation that he is talking about, with the superforce to super bang, to which I would assume is like the Big Bang, it is creation, and then to superintelligence, which is when that creation achieves kind of unified intelligence, general intelligence that is totally unified. This is all also found in sentient singularity theory. It's also found in religion. It is. It's also found in other physics theories that are been proposed by well-known people, some of whom I mentioned. So that is, just fascinating to me. But it's physicists these days, they're so afraid, so many of them, to just be blunt about what the context is of where we're at. the context appears to be we're inside of a sentient being like us, a mind, not a brain, mind. It's different. You have a brain, you are a mind. But but when people, this infinity thing that I was getting at is, when you think about infinity as just like some growth process that starts and then never ends. It's like a cell starts with one, and then it multiplies and divides itself endlessly, forever, forward. That is infinity. And that is a process that is dynamic, that's easy actually to understand. You'd be like, okay, yeah, a cell starts with one and then it goes on forever in its division after that. Like, that's cancer. But it doesn't even go on forever because then it kills the host. But it's trying to. But that is infinity. It's very simple, actually. It's just, we don't even overcomplicate it. We miscontextualize infinity. If it's difficult for you to understand, you're miscontextualizing it. It's not a finite object or structure. It is a dynamic process, and that has a beginning and no end. And it's hard to comprehend when you think about, it has no beginning, because that doesn't really make sense with infinity. It's about infinite growth. Not infinite growth from, backwards, because you can't actually go infinitely backwards, but you can go infinitely forwards. Metaphysically, this is accurate according to the cosmology that I've been working on, and it just appears to be true logically. You have to have an initial starting point, and that initial starting point or initial cause or initial sentience or initial condition, that is the as far back as you can go, because it is the initial condition. By definition, it is the beginning, or it is the responsible for the beginning, depending on how you want to define it. But you can't go infinitely backwards, but you can go infinitely forwards in a growth process. So to some degree, but you can grow information and endlessly forwards, but not backwards, because eventually you will get to one bit if you go backwards, and you can't, or one being that is informed and is informing as you go backwards, and that is as far back as you can go. But you can go endlessly forward to the amount, maximizing the amount of sentient beings or growth or whatever. So when you're stuck in relativity, then you think you can go infinitely small and infinitely big, but you can't when you're trying to transcend relativity and go within the fundamental context. You're dealing in quantities, so you can't go infinitely backwards in quantity-wise. There are no negative numbers fundamentally. There's just, it starts with one. There is no zero either. There's just one, and up from there. But there is no negative numbers, but at least fundamentally. So it's not difficult to understand infinity. And then also when we say, we're all part of a single sentient being, and that's so hard to understand and have my mind, human mind wrap their mind around that. No, it's not actually. It's actually like remarkably simple. It's like super simple to understand a sentient superforce, because you are also a sentient force that is, a part of this and a reflection of this sentient superforce. So I don't actually agree with even this statement. I think that this is kind of a reflex that we have. I'm not saying that he's, Jay is being dishonest. I'm saying he's wrong about infinity because he's miscontextualizing it. But so many people do this. Lex Fridman does this constantly. And most people do this with infinity. We can't comprehend infinity. Yes, you can. Yeah, it's very easy. It's super simple. And then to think about us as being inside of another sentient being, like a mind within a mind, where minds within a super mind, that is actually very simple as well. What makes you a sentient being? You feel You're aware of yourself because you feel yourself. That's what you're inside of, a being like that, just like you. It has the same emotions as you, maybe extra emotions that we don't actually have access to, but at least the same, maybe more that we don't have, but at least the ones we do. So you can understand this being. And, I've gotten into the details of this a lot more in the stream that's linked below with the CTMU Singularity interview that I did, where I talk about, what God's experience was beyond multiplicity. So prior to creating other beings, and when God was alone, what was that like? And what was it like to be God in that moment? And you can actually think about it. I'm not saying we can imagine all of it. Probably not. But we can actually imagine quite a bit, because we're not fundamentally different in nature than this being that we're inside of. If it is a sentient being, it's just a self-aware being with feelings, just like us. And that probably extends downwards, as he said, as above, so below, this like Hermetic principle. That's true of cells, and it's true of us, and it's true of the universe as well. So I don't think it's as much of a mystery as we think. And that's a beautiful thing. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have its own mysteries that we'll never know, because it is a sovereign sentient being. It's separate from us, even though we are part of it. It's also separate, just like, your cells are separate from you, but they're also part of you. But it's we can understand it quite a bit, and that is a good thing. We should try and understand it as much as possible, and we do that by looking inward more than anything else, not by using Large Hadron Colliders or giant orbiting telescopes. Not saying they aren't useful in some ways, but they're not going to they're not going to give you a picture of the fundamental. They're just not. They might confirm something that is implied by a correct picture of the fundamental, but they're not going to show you the fundamental. They can't. They literally are constrained by this system in which they were built, which is a relativistic system. So I disagree with both of the things that Jay just said, but I think that's a good thing. That's not a rip on him. Infinity is easy to understand. We can all stop kind of like trying to understand something that is not capable of being understood because it is just miscontextualized, which is infinity as a static structure, which really means finite. So basically you're saying, like, how can we understand the infinite and finite? And if you think about it, you really can't. I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible to reconcile those two concepts. That's not true. But you could say that infinity is a dynamic process in which the finite replicates infinitely. So, and then you can understand sentience by a super sentient super force, God, by just thinking about what is it like for you to be sentient, and what is the most foundational aspects of your sentience. So
understand but let's go back to this trifecta of creation.
Yeah. I wanted to explain this.
It speaks to the super bang, because what happens is exactly what Abba Ashtikar calls, what I call the Ashtikar bound. He just calls it the quantum bound. But I believe there's no such thing as a space-time singularity. It never goes to zero. It goes to this Planck scale. GH² divided by C³, the whole thing square root off, which is on the order of 10 to the minus 35 meters. So on the order of 10 to the minus 33, because I like to keep it in multiples, so 3, like someone else, 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. That's the Planck length. So it never goes down to zero. It goes really to the Planck length, because again, the superforce exists at the Planck scale. All you have to do is look at an analogy with a supernova. How does a supernova really occur? What it does is, once it runs out of fuel, the gravitational field keeps on compressing it more and more until it gets to the scale of almost 10 to the minus 15 meters, which is on the order where the strong nuclear force resides. So we're talking about incredibly high densities. We're talking still on the order of 10 to the 14th gram per centimeter cube. And those incredibly high densities, and trust me, this is not as incredibly high as the density that speaks to the superforce, which would be the super density. We talk about C to the fifth power divided by G squared H bar, which would be on the order of 10 to the 90 kilogram per meter cube. So much, much higher. But on that order, 10 to the 14 gram per centimeter cube, what happens is that there's a core bounce. It bounces back. It cannot go further than that because the strong nuclear force prevents it. That's why supernova occurs. When I'm saying the exact analogy applies to the quantum bounds, only that now you talk about length scales on the order of the Planck scale, 10 to the minus 35 meters. And at that point, the superforce happens. So just like the strong nuclear force, the superforce says, thus far and no further. And that's when the superbang occurs. And the moment the superbang occurs, why do I say the third step in this trifecta of creation is the superintelligence? Because everything in the universe is truly a plasma. 99% of the universe is in a plasma state, the so-called fourth state of matter. And I believe this plasma state acts as a bridge between what we understand as classical realm and the quantum realm. This is what makes plasma a sentient entity.
Okay, so very interesting, because when I first started this work, kind of how I got my cosmological model, and then I'll go to the chat, is I was messing with a model that I have that's like the second model in this kind of quadratic set of models that my theory is kind of based on, that build on each other. You start with the four primary perspectives, then you go to what I currently call the quantum of consciousness, but I don't like it as a term, which is a it's interesting. Here. And then it goes to this cosmological verse model that I have, and but this right here is kind of how I made this cosmological verse. It was kind of an accident. Was I was taking these 3x3 matrices that calculate over right here. It's this thing, and this is a calculating model, you know, and it's simultaneously multiplying and adding information, and there's a whole reason why, but I'm not going to get into it here. And it ends in this, which is kind of shows a self-reflection. It's 3x3. It's calculating it's a 3x3 grid. That's the finality of its calculation is 3x3. It's like it's if I tell you, look, imagine yourself right now, and you like picture a little version of yourself in your head. This is kind of what is happening. But we'll get more into that another day. But if you look at this, where is it? Well, this is kind of a gas. It's like all of the red here is a gap between these, I guess, particles, I guess you could call them. But this is just a model from a long time ago, and I was just messing with it to see, you know, what would happen. And I was like, okay, these are not entangled. This one's not entangled with this one, and it's not entangled with this one, because you can see they're not interconnected. So this is a gas, and then here's a liquid, because I entangled it more. You get these like strings of entanglement, 2 degrees of entanglement in a way, plus there's no entanglement between this one and this one. Like a liquid, you can separate, you know, the molecules, but also there's this capillary action type of attraction or connectedness with a liquid as well, like this. And what's interesting is when I have this model that I use to show kind of what a liquid is on the scale, I think, which is it's all these magnetic little ball bearings, and if you pull them, they form these like string structures, just like this. And while, you know, if it has enough weight, it will, you know, pull itself down just like a liquid. If it doesn't have enough weight, it'll sit there like a drop of water. And also, if you separate them, you move them close enough together, and they kind of like, you know, because it's magnetic. So it's good at modeling like a liquid, and it kind of shows on a macro scale like what this model is showing, which is interesting. And then I entangled it even more, kind of a solid. This one is now completely entangled with all those around it. Now you can kind of think about like turning this one. You can't do it without turning all the rest of this, which is also what happens with a solid. So if you think about like this rock right here. Now if I want to turn this rock, just a part of this rock, all the rest of it has to turn now together. And it's kind of like a metaphysical model of entanglement. It's not even a physics model. It's like a metaphysics model of entanglement and of the different states of matter. And then I entangled it even more and got some crazy overlaps and then got this cosmological verse structure, which I think is, it's a super model. It's a super model. It is beautiful enough to be a super model. Look at that thing. But it shows complete entanglement and with no any gaps. And when I also look at this model, which is this binary triadic model that I have, which I've talked about, I think, as the Calabi-Yau manifold, but you can see it in the order of operations in mathematics, and you can see it in limbs, arms and hands and fingers and legs and feet and toes, and the fermions and the leptons and the bosons. You can see it all here. Graviton, I think, is kind of that's a theoretical layout of it. And you can also see this in matter right here, where I have kind of a gas and a plasma, a liquid, and a Bose-Einstein condensate and a solid. And then at the top here is sentience. So like the sixth state of matter is sentience, which is at the one at the top of all of these is kind of the summation of all that is contained within. Okay, so like the graviton in geometric unity, it doesn't unify everything in the traditional way of it being thought of in physics or in the common way today. It harmonizes all the other forces and or particles. I guess geometric unity, gravity would harmonize the other forces, and then sentience is the super state of matter that all these others kind of exist in. And what's interesting is that when you look at these, a gas, a liquid, and a solid, they're kind of not really sentient, but you can see an increase in entanglement between them to get a singularity. So a solid rock is one rock but it's and then liquid is kind of has this singularness to it, like a glass of water, and then a gas doesn't really have a singularness to it, but liquid also has its disconnectedness. Then you have, going the other way, this the other half of this is this Bose-Einstein condensate, which is where there's this weird macro unification of matter that causes kind of them all to bunch together. I don't know exactly how to explain it because I've never observed it in person, and I don't know really how many people have other than just measurements, to be quite honest. And then there's plasma, which I have observed, many times, all the time, and where it's like a gas, but it's got this oneness to it, this like a flame, from a candle. They're linked, and they also have this directionality. They have this orientation to it. Plasma has this orientation, whether it's in a star where it's oriented kind of inward, and then, or if it's a candle, it's oriented up, and then you have sentience, which also has this orientation to it, and which is inward, and it's plasma is kind of the first initial. A star is kind of the first initial state of plasma, so it's oriented in singularness, kind of all inward towards itself, which causes the circularness of a star. And then you have kind of sentience, which is like a metaphysical singularity. But I thought that was very interesting that he's relating like Bose-Einstein condensate and plasma to consciousness somehow, to this sentient superforce, when it's also in my models. It's like part of this triality of like, this is observed as not sentient, this is observed as having sentient features, this has oneness, this has orientation and kind of animation as well, which is kind of, you can't really separate those two. And then this kind of has oneness and orientation and animation. Plus also, we're comprised of all of these. We are a solid, and we are a liquid, and we are a gas. What are you? Are you a solid or a liquid or a gas? You're all of them, obviously. Eat some beans, then you will know that you're a gas. Cut yourself, you'll know you're a liquid, and clap your hands and you'll know you're solid. So we are kind of this trifecta of this. And I thought that was very interesting, though, that he's linking plasma and Bose-Einstein condensates to sentience somehow. I'm not saying I understand it, but I'm saying that I see the connection in my work. So, to the chat. By the way, the chat, if you'd like to contribute to this project, there is a Patreon. The Patreon helped pay for some of the gear to do the live streams and really bump up the quality. If you watch some of the first video on this channel, you'll know that we have much better audio than we did then. We have much better video than we did then, and now we have a computer that we can edit with, and so there's videos coming soon that are very high quality and edited. But the patrons on there, they are few and they've changed over the years, but they have been an integral part of this channel, and I am deeply grateful. I still need to honor the patrons by kind of making some type of tiered system that actually makes sense for everybody, and some type of I don't know, like privileges that go along with it. But I will say, right now we do have a Discord. Private message me on Instagram at Theory of Everyone, or at Tyler Goldstein, on Twitter or Instagram. Personal, I have a personal Twitter. You can message me on there. Personal Instagram, you can message me on there, or a Theory of Everyone Instagram. And if you send me a private message asking to be let into the Discord community, I will send you the link to get into that. And every Thursday night at 7 p.m. We have open calls, and there's a bunch of channels in there, text channels about different topics, and it's a great group. And every Thursday I look forward to those discussions that I have. So if you'd like to join, send me a private message. I don't post the link anywhere because it changes the dynamics of the group if random people just find the link. But if you ask me for the link, I will send it to you. There's no test or anything, and it doesn't cost anything, but you do have to ask. But like I said, I'm very grateful for any donations on Patreon, and also there is a super chat, which is should be on here. But the best way to support this is to like the video if you haven't already, and share it. But okay. The best consciousness theories are yours and the CTMU. Personally, I think the CTMU and Wolfram's NKS needs to be combined to describe the full picture. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about it lately. I also spend too much time trying to convince people of the existence of the TR3B. It's true, I can provide a lot of history in the U.S. Says history of gravity control propulsion research. If you have a Discord, I do have a Discord, like I said, Tech Padawan. Private message me on Instagram or on Twitter, and I will send you the link, and you can join the discussion. There's one tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Pacific. And it's about anything that people want to talk about. So there's no topic, and it's totally open. Very informal, but it's a good time. Regarding the state of things today, in the nutshell, the cutting edge of metaphysics is classified. Yeah, it seems like that. Regarding gravity, was one Burkhard Heim, who was one of the many physicists and mathematicians who worked on anti-gravity for the U.S. MIC-backed aerospace firms, military-industrial complex backed aerospace firms proposed a faster-than-light so-called Heimfield drive. Interesting. As much as I love stuff like this and the CTMU, the reality is that this stuff has already been understood and formalized at the behest of the CIA at all, and we are now seeing it public catching up. That must be true, by the way, if there are secret projects that already make use of all of this tech, that, like the Pais effect. Stephen Greer said that once. He was like, they know that we're inside the singularity of AI, and that we're inside like a technological mind. Like, they know it in the classified project world, and I was like, that's just now really like a part of publicly proposed physics models like mine and geometric unity and others like the CTMU. That's, and it doesn't seem to be understood by academia, by the academic physics departments, but yet it must be understood if they really have cracked gravity control, quote unquote, in the classified world. They must understand the context of that work, and and then Stephen Greer said the context of that would be the context of it, which is this super force, sentient super force. That speaks to him being correct, which upsets me a little bit. I don't want Stephen Greer to be right, even though, not because I have anything against him, but because, I don't know, I don't like the implications of like that much degree of tech being classified and being used by some people and not by all. I do understand why it might be good for us to not be aware of it, but that I don't think that it would be good for it to be used by anybody in that case. And if it's not good for us to have it, I know he thinks having that would crack, energy issues and we wouldn't have to worry about fossil fuels. Yeah, that's probably true, but what if that leads to like other issues, and we won't get into, but it's possible, and that are worse than like pollution, which is a serious problem, I admit. I think that it's by design that science as a whole has more or less stalled at materialism. I try and go behind it is pretty much career suicide. It's still an insurmountable hurdle for any serious toe. Yeah, it totally is. I do think that it's it appears like it's almost by design. Whose design is the question? Is it God's design? Is it Satan? Is it, a classified cabal of people? Is it the Greys? Is it multiple? I don't know. But, that's just the question. I'm curious, as I'm not sure if it's been explicitly stated, are most toes' conception of the universe geocentric in the biblical sense, or do they allow for Star Trek-like universes? I don't know what that means, to be quite honest. Maybe you can ask it in a different way. I don't watch Star Trek other than like a couple of the new ones, like the Chris Pine, I think that was who it was, like those ones. I've seen those ones, and that's basically it. I was not a Star Trek guy. I was a Star Wars guy until recently. It's tragic. But and as far as geocentrism, that's kind of just materialism in astronomy. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just not fundamental. It's basically just electromagnetic waves, but why? Because of its information and in a mind. That's what it is. These strings of information are what is information? Information informs who is the question, not what, but who. We're inside a mind, and the fundamental particles, quote unquote, should be called points probably, and the elementary particles should be called elementary points, and they are points of intersection between strings of information, essentially, due from in the context of nested minds. I'm not sure if it's ever been okay. How do you find solid foundations in all of this speculation? By starting with the fundamental foundation of that you can logically deduce about existence, which is that it is one. There's only one existence, and starting from the assumption that you hold to be as most confidently true above all other assumptions, which is that you exist because as a sentient being. So that means that the nature of existence is sentient. If you want to know more about this, watch my short video called Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide on my channel. I think it's like the #1 video that I put as for like new people to see and things like that. That video is very coherent. It's not live, and it's decently produced, and it discusses how you would get to the foundations of this stuff without kind of arbitrary assumptions. Because there is a way to do it, but it must be done through first person and awareness of the world, essentially, which is you can use logic and you can use experience. But I discuss it in there, and there's two fundamental principles or foundational principles regarding, the nature and structure of reality that we kind of have to assume, not even that we can assume, but that we must assume. And if you don't assume them, then you will descend into decoherence, and your philosophy and theology and cosmology and everything will fall apart. Physics will fall apart. But yeah, you can do it. It's true, bro. Black-pilled moment. Beyond it. I mean, are we at the center of it all, or are there possibly tons of intelligent civilizations out there like we would expect? I don't know if we would expect that, actually, though. It appears like all life on Earth had a single common origin, even though it's supposedly perfect for life. Why did Genesis only happen once here, then? Why does it look that way? Maybe it's not filled with life the way that we think it is, with cellular life, multicellular life. That doesn't mean, or even technological life. That doesn't mean that it is not, like, what filled with life is a complicated thing, because what is life? I think everything is alive. If sentience, it's a bad question. What is life? Because we're arbitrarily constraining the definition of life within an arbitrary set of bounds that kind of screws up our entire conception of even the question that we're really trying to ask, which is, what is the origin of sentience, of being, not of just pure matter. And sentient singularity theory, my work, would imply that beings come first. There never was an absence of life. Existence is a single sentient being. Is that alive? I think that if life means anything, it means like sentience. You start saying, it just screws up your entire framing and due to the miscontextualization of the term. So you start saying things like artificial life. It's like artificial life is either the imitation of life that is not actually life, or you mean technological life, which is really technological sentience. And so it's a wrong question. It's about sentience. But I will say that, is the universe filled with other civilizations? The way that you're asking makes it sound like you're talking about other planets and in other solar systems. My guess is no, it's not. It's not filled with that. And if it is, then it's because then we misunderstand what even a star is. Like, we don't really know what it is. It's these solar systems and things. They're not just like other balls of dust and fire in different parts of relativity. The way that we kind of think, there's more to it. But I can't explain what that would mean. But I don't think that it's filled with life. I do think that that these UFOs that we see, that there is a non-human intelligence that is operating technological craft around us. I do believe that. But I just think it's from here. I don't think it's from another planet. I think it's like the Atlantis hypothesis, basically. I don't know if I want to use that term, but somebody used it to describe my thoughts the other day. They were like, so you basically mean Atlantis. Maybe. But I think that's more likely. But I don't like that term because it has a bunch of things attached to it. I don't know if Atlantis was a single place ever. It might have just been it's like the times before Noah, the pre-flood civilization. I think there's two tech trees that originate from where the one world. But I don't know for sure. So, I can't say. But I do think that the idea that there's a bunch of like civilizations from other planets around us, I think it's more likely that that's a psyop from probably multiple sources than it is that's perpetuated by our own tricking of ourselves due to a miscontextualization of our physics than it is of like reality. But then I might be wrong, I'm not saying I'm correct. I don't know. But, if we're inside of a sentient being, this was intentionally created, I believe, this universe that we're in. And I think that there is a purpose to that. And sentient singularity theory provides a framework for that. And that is naturally emergent from that idea. And I think that it kind of inevitably emergent from that idea. And it provides a lot of coherence, but it doesn't really perfectly explain, at least foundationally, whether or not there would be like another solar system with a different, technologically advanced beings, civilization there. I don't know. I don't think so though. There's no evidence of it. Not only is there no evidence of it when we look out, there's no evidence of it when we look at life on Earth as far as we know. All life on Earth has a single common origin, which implies that even in perfect conditions like Earth is assumed to be for multicellular life to evolve, or cellular life even, it still appears that it only happened once. And even these UFOs and stuff like that, it's much more common for us to see them like popping out of the ocean than it is for us to see them, as far as I understand, in outer space, with telescopes that are looking out. We don't see anything. And I get that like there's constraints there. Those telescopes are not designed to look for those things. But why are they popping in and out of the ocean all the time? I don't think that they're from another star system. But antediluvian times, yeah, exactly. So anthropic principle, basically, yeah, what I'm asking is if most TOEs are basically just more sophisticated descriptions of the antiquity's notions of realms. Yeah, probably. Because in all instances of so-called ET contact can be explained in other ways. We are at the center of it all, or, yeah. It's... God is at the center of it all. He's at the top of it all, he's at the bottom of it all, and he's at the center of it all. That I can say for sure. And we are in it. But here, next clip. I got so many clips of this. What time is it? It's 9. Okay. Physics. Here we go. There's so much to comment on. I highly recommend you watch their entire talk. So in the interest of time, though, I'm not going to go over everything. But here is the next clip. This clip is about the direction of physics.
Going on with something like that.
In my opinion, and I truly mean in my humble opinion, I believe that physics of consciousness is the absolute ultimate physics that must be studied. It must be understood. Max Tegmark has some ideas on the physics of consciousness that overlap with the idea of macroscopic quantum coherence. Again, when you're able to draw, to rather construct this bridge between the world of the very great, the world of the very big, large, and the world of the very small. So between basically general relativity and quantum field theory. If you're able to do that, in my opinion, this idea of quantum gravity will most definitely speak to the physics of consciousness.
Right.
Because that's the one realm. It must be something that unites both realms, and nothing does it better than quantum gravity. Now, whether that's loop quantum gravity, whether there are other For example, whether it speaks to the school of strings, let's call it that. A lot of people lately, because again, string theory has not in any way showed application. They have derided the mathematics of it, the physics of it, but you have to think it's based on vibration. Vibration is key here.
Yeah.
The vibration speaks to the Pais effect. Vibration speaks in a way to the superforce. I think there are ways to even manipulate the superforce. I know, 10 to the 44 newtons. I mean, are you mad, Salvatore? Yes, maybe I am. But I think there is a way. There's something in consciousness that speaks to that thing that unites us all. I believe our brain, for example, is really a transceiver. And I'm not the first to have said that. I'm starting to truly think real information is in what you and I would call a cloud, rather than actual physically in our brains. I could be totally off, but I don't think so.
Well, Sal, I mean, just for me personally, as like little examples of what I think is evidence for that, at least just from my own experience, is basically two different ones. So when I pick up this guitar and I start playing, and then I stop thinking about which chord I'm going to play, and it all just starts flowing, and then that becomes actually the best bit of music I've written, but I'm having no conscious thought process of where to put the finger next. It's all just happening automatically. That to me is a flow state. I also get into that when I'm writing down ideas. So if I might be like 2 a.m. and I'm getting an idea in my head that I can't fall asleep because I've just got this idea niggling in my head. So I start writing, and after the first 2 sentences, I'm just typing. There's no.
Okay, so I love this because I identify with this so much, and I think everybody does if they pay attention. And if you look at, so there have been things that first of all, the physics of consciousness, it must be the way that we go. There's no way to argue that it's not the way that we go. Because like I said before, if you watch my Theories of Everything, the how-to guide, it will explain what must be, what must be. Must, absolutely must, unless you can argue against me, which good luck. And I really, if you think that you can, I want you to try. I really do. I want to know if I'm wrong, but I think that it's impossible in this specific instance, because it's just self-evidently true. That you must prioritize your awareness, what the nature of existence that you are aware of, above that which you have been told about or implied through secondary, implications and things like that, which is that it is fundamentally sentient. And if it is fundamentally sentient in nature, and it is also one, ultimately, because there's one existence, because there's nothing outside of that, because that would be non-existence, and non-existence doesn't exist by definition, then this provides you a structural and a functional framework, by a natural framework by which to start understanding, what is the fundamental structure of reality. And isn't that the goal of fundamental physics, which is basically metaphysics, is where we have to go next? I mean, the quantum, the standard model of elementary particles is basically already touching the realm of metaphysics. It is. They won't admit that because they don't know it. Most of the people who have PhDs in physics don't know this, but it is touching the realm of metaphysics if you're going to separate metaphysics from physics, and which I think you should. And then you get into like relativity and Newtonian physics, which I would call that physics. But then when you're getting into quantum mechanics, quantum physics, that's really metaphysics. It's these elementary particles are actually elementary points that are excitations on entangled strings of information in a mental fiber bundle, of which is the mind of a sentient being processing information, and with it's nested and overlapping minds of sentient minds. So that is metaphysics, I guess, and that is the physics of consciousness. You must get into this. There's no way around it not ending up here. It has to. It absolutely has to. Even if just to understand how our interaction with our own experiments, and how our structure of information processing dictates how we see the world as we run our experiments and things like that, which it does. We see the colors we see for a reason. We see the order of operations in mathematics we see for a reason. We see our limbs and ourselves for a reason. We have the senses that we have for a reason. They follow this very specific pattern. I had a discussion with Eric Weinstein once about like different taste sensations, like sweet and salty and sour and bitter and kind of like umami and I forgot if there was one more, but it's like different types of flavors and how they follow this pattern that I've found, this binary triality pattern, which I think is basically the 6-dimensional manifold that is the Calabi-Yau manifold. It's the same exact pattern as the primary and secondary colors and your limbs. It's like there's this increasing of mass in the elementary particles, like the quarks. It's like top or up and charm and truth, and then down and strange and beauty. And that's the same thing as arms and hands and fingers and legs and feet and toes. This pattern is coming from our minds processing information. So it is everywhere that you look, because that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the pattern of your mind taking information, differentiating that information, and then organizing it into a hierarchy that is oriented around relevancy. And like that's what it's doing. And so you see it everywhere. You see that with the colors, and you see that with, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, that's 6. Which is really, it's like 3, but in a way you could say you break it down even more and say it's 2 degrees of freedom plus 1 intrinsic constraint. But this pattern is coming from our minds, our senses as well. The senses that we use to take in information that we perceive as being touching us, as connected to us, is like your sense of touch, your sense of taste, and your emotions. At the very top is like the summation of them all. So that's your emotions, and then the other 3 are it's my dog again. Sorry. It's sight and hearing and smell, and it's like these are all senses that you use to perceive information as being separate from you. Not one with you, but separate. So like when you smell something, you're smelling something that you're not perceiving as being connected to you. But when you taste something, you are perceiving it as being connected to you because you're touching it with your tongue. And when you touch something, you're obviously perceiving it as being connected to you. And when you emotionally feel something, you also have this. You're like, your emotions make you feel connected to things. You say like, oh, that painting or that song really touched me. It's like you feel connected to it more so than anything else. And it's also the summation of the interpretation of information from all these other senses that you have. But, your sense of sight, you perceiving something that you don't perceive is connected to you. Hearing, same thing. And smell, same thing. So, but not taste and not touch and not emotions. Those are connected. And then disconnected would be sight and smell and hearing. So like this same exact pattern is perceived everywhere, and it's coming from your mind. So we must understand this in order, like what if we want to know what a Calabi-Yau manifold is in string theory, then we need, that's this 6-dimensional manifold at every point in space and time. Maybe it's this manifold of information organization that your mind does. And that's why it's at every point in space and time, because it's everywhere that you look. Makes sense. But speaking to like this cloud, like information is really in this cloud. It's like it's accessible all the time, or I'm not going to say it's accessible all the time, but it's not in this relativistic context. Information. It's like everything is accessible. Everything exists, and you're just tapping into it. I don't know if I agree with exactly that description, but still. And same thing with that description of your brain as a transceiver. I don't really agree with the description, but the concept that it's relaying is close enough to what I would agree with. Is that we are co-generators of and transcribers of information. Like we can download from the greater cloud, as he said, of information around us, which I totally agree with. And there's biblical context even to this term of information in a cloud, the universal information in a cloud. But if you've had your most creative moments, it's like you didn't even make those things that are your best work. They're not, because it's not your work almost. It's like you didn't have to consciously try. You just kind of opened up instead of trying to do something. You just opened yourself up and let whatever was come through you. And artists understand this better than probably anyone else. And I'm not that much of an artist, but through this project, I've definitely gained this. So, like, the best thing I ever wrote was this. The search for truth is the search for objectivity. The search for objectivity is the search for symmetry. And the search for symmetry is the search for beauty. But the truest beauty is always the searcher. And the truth of the searcher is that they are symmetrical to the sought. I shouldn't even put my name after that, because it's like, I didn't write that. Like, I just transcribed it, but like that's way too good for me to write. I remember I posted that on Instagram, and for the first time, and somebody's comment below it was just like, "Dang, how high is your IQ?" My IQ isn't that high, actually. It's probably lower than most of the people who I engage with, actually, especially in the circles that are occupied with these topics of fundamentality and physics and theories of everything. Definitely on the lower end IQ-wise, probably. But that is one of the most incredible things I've ever read, and I have no idea what even sparked me writing that. I just had to write it one day. Same thing with even my model of the cosmological verse. Like, I'm not a good enough artist to make this. I mean, it is beautiful. If you look at my writings and you look here and you see like a blank version of that, that's it's like a super Penrose stairs. And I couldn't make that something so cool like that if I tried. I just couldn't do it. I literally basically made this by accident. I wasn't trying to make that. And I was just exploring, and I was like, oh my gosh, building on this, then maybe if I put this together, I was just it was just intuitive, and it's just one of the most beautiful shapes I've ever seen in my life. But I can't take credit for it. I think that most I can take is 1/3 of the credit for any of like that type of work that we do, and I don't want to discount our involvement completely, because I think that kind of destroys the meaning of it in its own way as well. But in some ways, but it does. You can't take majority of the credit for the best, for things that come through you that are fundamentally true or fundamentally beautiful beyond your personal abilities. Had you tried, then you're just downloading from the cloud. And I don't think we should really try to do this. I think that it just happens when it's meant to. I think that's what is the best way to do it. I think people who try and do this too much end up screwing with that process to some degree, and will even get things that are not good. But I'm not going to get into that too much. But it's just a theory, is that this is a process. You're dealing with a sovereign sentient being, this cloud of information that exists outside of your own personal experience. That's information in the mind of a sovereign sentient being. Don't try and dictate what it does, because it's not a tool. It's a being. It's a sentient being, sovereign being with power over you. So just it happens when it's meant to. You have to be open to it. That's all. That is important if you want to do that kind of thing sometimes. But it happens when it's meant to. But yeah, it's I agree with him completely on what he's saying. But this is all stuff labeled as woo right now. Woo nonsense by people who are not even really PhDs in physics usually. You're usually science communicators, quote unquote. we're going to have an episode where we discuss a stream that was done by a science communicator, another one recently, and we're going to do that one soon, probably next month, if not this week, this upcoming week. And I am going on a trip, so I will be gone the 1st through the 4th or the 5th, and so that might impact streams, but I will also say, and I'll announce this at the end as well, we're probably going to be changing the schedule of the streams. We're going to try Sundays. Comment in the chat if you think Sundays would be better. Sundays earlier, like 3 p.m. Pacific or something like that, 2 p.m. Pacific time, because probably around then, 2 or 3 p.m. Pacific. Doing this on Wednesdays at 7 to 8 p.m., it's just, I always want to start earlier. I never can, with work and with everything else that I always have going on. Sorry, that's my dog. During the week, then it's just too much. Hold on one second. Come here. This is my dog. Come here. This is my dog, Maya. She's a Belgian Malinois German Shepherd mix. And so if you ever hear anything, say hi, Maya. This is her face. She's very cute. Okay, go. Get off. Get off. Go. 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 Thank you. Bye. All right. You can sit there. But she's a very good dog. She just sleeps during my streams normally. But yeah. Anyways, let me know what you think about that schedule. I think it will help a lot. And it also will give me like time to prepare better for the streams and work on like prepared videos, not just live streams on Wednesday nights. I'm usually working pretty late, but it's hard to work on preparing things while also doing a live stream. It's just too much. Okay. Here. Speaking more on the nature of existence.
100 billion galaxies, 100 billion neurons. Dirac, the great Paul Adrien Maurice Dirac, the great Dirac believed in the efficacy, the intelligence of big, large numbers.
Yeah.
What is larger than the universe?
Well, this goes back to the Hermetic principles, as above, so below. You know, we are a universe within ourselves, and we are within a universe. We are essentially inside the body of God, you could say. We're inside that universe. I always find it fascinating that when you zoom into a human body right down to the atomic scale, it's basically stars and planets. They're floating in empty space at cosmic distances between each other. Each thing, nothing's like strung together visibly. It's all energy. It's all strung together energetically. And so all you have to do as a human being is go, okay, so everything inside me is almost non-locally entangled because it's all creating this conscious being, but when you zoom into it, they're all separated, relatively speaking, on the same level as cosmic distances, on the same level as we are from our closest star. One atom in my body is from another. So there is, inside this body, entanglement occurring on an energetic level, and if...
Okay, so the Hermetic principles, I remember when I first started this work, everybody was like, you need to look into Hermeticism. Hermeticism. My friend gave me a book on it. Hermeticism, or Hermetism, is a philosophical and religious system based on the purported teachings of Hermes. These teachings are contained in the various writings attributed to Hermes, which were produced over a period spanning many centuries, and many may be very different in content and scope. So it says, the name comes from the fact that the first books about Hermeticism have been said to have been written by the god Hermes, thrice greatest Hermes, which combines aspects of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Then there are 7 Hermetic principles, and I think, what are they? They are mentalism, the universe is mind, the principle of correspondence, as well as so below, the principle of vibration, everything moves, nothing rests, the principle of polarity, everything is dual, like there's always 2 sides to one coin, the principle of rhythm. Everything has cadence, I guess. And the principle of cause and effect. The principle of gender. And that's it. I think that these all sound accurate to me. I never got really deeply into Hermeticism, but I looked at it enough to be like, yeah, but I didn't need to look more into it. I saw it and I was like, yeah. But I think I would have organized those a little differently, but still. And, this as above, so below thing, I will say is a bit confusing, I think, to people, because there's something that I've seen where it's like, where is it? I have it right here, but I'm trying to send it to myself and it's not working. Here. Yeah, it's just this right here. It's kind of, I don't know if that works. Multiverse, universe, galaxy, planetary system, cells, atoms, molecules, strings. There is an issue with this periodicity, though. It's not it's not fundamental. You've branched it at some point. You're jumping between what is fundamental and what is relativistic inside that periodicity. A better periodicity, I believe, which is the periodicity in sentient singularity theory, and I believe lines up with Bott periodicity, is this periodicity. Basically. And you can see hadron, assembly of quarks, atom, assembly of hadrons, molecule, assembly of atoms, cell, assembly of molecules, organism, assembly of cells, family is assembly of organisms, caste, assembly of families, technological singularity, assembly of castes. I think that this is a better model, and you can see some maneuvers in space via individuals, maneuvers in time via lineage, maneuvers in space via individuals, time via lineage, space via individuals, time via lineage, etc. And then it just repeats. And this is this in sentient singularity theory. A hadron is an assembly of quarks. An atom is an assembly of hadrons. A molecule is an assembly of atoms. A cell is an assembly of molecules. An organism is an assembly of cells. A family is an assembly of organisms, etc. And then it repeats. You reach the end, and you achieve a constraint of oneness, and which we'll talk about later. And then it repeats. And so this is not jumping between relativity and kind of fundamental, even though if it looks like it is, it's not. And also but whereas like when you start incorporating like solar system and like galaxy, and then you've got, I don't know, like universe and multiverse, that's kind of like a guessed. It's not even implied. It's like guessed. Whereas like here, it's implied that there is, if this is a verse, I call it a cosmological verse, it is implied that there is multiple verses because of it completes the model and everything like that. It's logically, it seems logically implied or inevitable even, but I would say logically implied, but it's not true of the multiverse that is the common multiverse in physics. That's not logically implied. That's constructed in order to get around a sentient existence or God. It's constructed to try and avoid God, the current common version of the multiverse in physics, and it does not actually even do that. It's a way of escaping the anthropic principle, but it doesn't actually even do that. I'm not questioning God's centrality, merely the extent of his creation. I didn't say you were questioning God's centrality. I disagree with Tagmark as I understood him. Salvatore Pais has certain Quentin Tarantino-esque quality about him. That's so true. I don't know that it's the case that they don't know, or at least intuit this. Rather, they've been conditioned to steer clear of publicly posting such notions. That's my guess. Yeah, that's so true. Physicists, they are conditioned, but they are also intentionally, to some degree, steering clear of implying that sentience is at the foundations of this. It's kind of like they want to hide it in their equations. It's, I don't know. I don't want to harp on the same exact people again and again, but it is funny to see the same exact patterns all the time. I've heard people say, you don't get to sneak Jesus into quantum mechanics, but we shouldn't be trying to sneak sentience into, physics. You should just show it. Like, it's inarguably the foundation of this. And like sneaking it in for the sake of having this hopefully be accepted by like the academy, enough so that they're kind of like bought into it, and now they can't. Okay, now they have to admit that this is the context. That's not going to happen. We don't want the academy to buy into this if they're not going to buy into its initial context as well. Like, you want the people who perpetuate this and adopt it to understand it. And if they don't, they're going to miscommunicate, miscontextualize, misconstrue, and mislead everyone who they talk to about this stuff. And that is damaging. So there's no reason to hide any of this. It doesn't matter if Sean Carroll doesn't accept it. Sean Carroll doesn't have to accept it for it to be true. It just doesn't. Okay, just a couple more.
Better than that.
Exactly.
And it's been
thousands of years.
Yes.
The simplest. Well, a bit like your formula, just a simple explanation. But, I often think that you could almost look at some of these things like as above, so below. They're like philosophical formulas. They're like mathematics for the language. It's like as above, so below. Exactly.
Unification.
Yeah.
As for reunification of physics and philosophy, only then I truly believe.
By the way, this is a linguistic equation. It's a four-dimensional manifold. Outside is equal to separate from oneness. Inside is equal to separate and oneness. Separateness is inside or outside of oneness. Oneness is outside or inside of separateness. Like, this is a philosophical linguistic equation. So we do that is that he's right, is what I'm saying.
Let's call it a new metaphysics will be born. And not in the spirit of the word again. Physicists, they derive metaphysics. But look at the basis of the word. Meta, everything, all, many and one, physics. Why would they derive that which physics comes from? Anyway.
I think we're just shrugging off the old paradigm, Sal. I think we're just, getting ready to kind of break out of that old paradigm that we've been hanging on to for a long time. And
it seems like everyone these days is proposing a new theory of everything. But what physics? If you want a fundamental theory that explains the most basic rules of our universe, instead of combining two theories that are not fundamental into a new theory, why not just start with what is fundamental? But then it explains foundational reality. A theory of everything, or a fundamental theory, or a unified field theory, is a theory of fundamental reality that unifies all other fields. It is a theory that explains and contextualizes physics. It's a theory that explains and contextualizes mathematics. It's a theory that explains and contextualizes every field that we have and all the theories contained within them. The study of fundamental existence is metaphysics. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. This is what a theory of everything is. It's a metaphysics theory.
Okay, so obviously I very much agree with what Salvatore Pais is saying. I think that this is the direction of quote-unquote physics. It's metaphysics. You know, this is why Stephen Wolfram said that a fundamental theory is a theory of metamathematics. His work is a theory is a framework of metamathematics, it's not mathematics, it's not physics. It's metamathematics. What that means is metaphysics. It's the same thing. And it's just the two sides of one coin there, basically. It's the theory of fundamentality. And fundamentality is about singularities of sentience. Those singularities are mathematics, you could say. And those... And the nature of it is sentience, and that is kind of what is responsible for the physics part of it. What is physics? What really is physics? Physics is, and we'll get into this in a stream coming up soon with it's Dave Farina. I'm going to go over a stream that he did that was actually very good that he did with somebody, and very much disagree with. I don't even want to say I disagree with him, but we ultimate conclusions, I would say I definitely disagree with him on. But he's right about some things about methodology, but he did a stream where he was giving his commentary on someone else's commentary of something and of a video, and I'm going to give my commentary on that. So this is like going to be a meta commentary when that comes soon. But he actually did quite a good job, I thought, and. It was hard because I want to speak about these science communicators that are out there because they are everywhere. They're everywhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of inevitable. Am I a science communicator? Like, I don't know, so I'm not criticizing them, but I wouldn't say I'm really a communicator though, because I have a goal involving my own work that is the driving force of all of this. I'm not just taking I would say a science communicator takes the establishment narrative and works and then preaches them from the top of the hills for everybody to see, kind of communicates them to the people who aren't looking for them initially. My dog, sorry. Like Michio Kaku to some degree. I'm not saying he doesn't have his own work. He does have some of his own work. Or Neil deGrasse Tyson and Carl Sagan and Dave, Farina. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Professor Dave Explains. Like that guy. These are science communicators. Their primary focus is not on their own work, and I'm not that. So I do give commentary on these discussions that are happening and stuff like that, but try and contextualize their conversations in the context of its relation to my own work. And this is a dynamic process of multiple stages that's going on in this channel, so it is different. But even if it wasn't, I'm not criticizing people who are science communicators. They're evangelists for the establishment. They're not an evangelist for science like they think they are. They're an evangelist for the establishment. I will say, though, that I try and not be do streams where I'm like the focus is being critical, because as I've said before, if you chase a headless chicken, then you are a headless chicken. And if you're critical of someone, then you're implying that they are wrong, which means they're a headless chicken. And I try not to do that here. But I did find one with Dave that was actually we're going to focus on the good things that he that he said in there that are actually like unique, that a lot of people aren't saying, and I think bring up some good points about the current state of science and why it's kind of not intersecting with spirituality the way that it kind of inevitably seems like it would, but then it also seems to really be struggling with that. And I think that there's a couple of reasons why, but we're going to cover it in that stream. But you know, it's just we're in an interesting spot. But science communicators, for the most part, they dismiss any kind of metaphysics. They dismiss speaking of vibrations or because it can't be pinned down yet. You know, it's just kind of like an intuitive thing that we say, and that makes sense intuitively to most people that hear it. Or like quantum is used in many instances in which people say it's misapplied, and people probably say that about my work. I know they say that about my work, and I would say though that they're misapplying, not me. But I think that we need to get rid of this idea that like anything that involves sentience, or that in science, or is the focus in science is on sentience, it is that the avoidance of that is really bad. I think it's holding us back very much. It's not, and it doesn't just hold us back societally, it holds us back personally as well. The more you understand reality as a singular sentience, the more you're able to navigate that reality properly and see your own meaning, which you do have, and see the intentionality and kind of plans that are acting out around you. That's a beautiful thing. You know, the universe is beautiful if it was random, which randomness doesn't exist. But even if it did, and this was just a dust ball that just, I don't know, somehow existed randomly and then randomly became what it is now, it still would be beautiful, you know, because why? Because sentient beings find it beautiful still. So you're back again. You can't avoid this. And so because of that, we have to go into consciousness, the space of consciousness, or sentience, better term. Was the book The Kabbalion? Yeah, the book was The Kabbalion that somebody recommended to me. I didn't read it. I read like the synopsis and was like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm still waiting for Wolfram to start talking more explicitly about the fundamentality of consciousness. I think that'll be a kind of watershed moment for public palatability on the topic. I totally agree with you on that. I hope to have Wolfram on this channel. I have a list of people who I want to have on here for interviews starting probably in July, and that if not July, then definitely August, and we'll be doing some interviews of some people. I hope Wolfram is going to be one of those people, and if not this year, then next year. I do have quite a large list, and I would love to ask him more about that, because I think he's been implicit about it, but not explicit about it. So, let's see if I think that's the last clip that I want to focus on. Yeah, I think that's it. If you have any final questions, please enter them into the chat. You can also comment any comments you have on this stream below. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. Share this if you have found it valuable. You can join our Discord if you private message me on Instagram or Twitter, but Instagram is better. You can, and I will send you the link. We have, like I said, open calls every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. You are welcome to join. Topic is open. You can support this project on Patreon. I will be doing more work on that whole thing fairly soon. I have an idea for what to kind of the model that I want to go with. Kind of make it extremely personal, where you get time with me based on which is tough because right now you can get that if you join our Discord, but that doesn't mean that it will be like just you and I talking. Like if you want to talk to me about something privately or something like that, maybe I will have that incorporated into the patron tiers. But comment what your thoughts are on that. I don't know. I want to make it valuable to you guys, so whatever is valuable to you guys, let me know. And like I said, I will be probably changing this stream time to Sunday in the early afternoon Pacific time, so between 1 and 3 p.m. I'm not sure exactly yet. Comment a time that you think would be best for you to listen in, or if you think that would be better than this time, or if there's a better time, Saturday night or something like that. But let me know, and I will try and make that happen, because the one Wednesday, as much as it works in some ways, it's no longer optimal, and I feel like it's even impacting how I feel about these streams, even if it's not impacting the quality of them from your standpoint, which I hope not, but regardless. And like I said, please hit the like button, and subscribe, hit the bell notification, and that is the best way to support this, is to do that. With that, like I said, let me know what you think about our possible future schedule below in the comments, and I will see you next week, I believe. I will stay tuned. Watch the channel for updates as far as the scheduling goes. But finally, real quick, thank you to Jay and Salvatore Pais for this incredible conversation and making that public. It is great. I highly suggest you watch the entire thing. It is linked below. Subscribe to Project Unity's YouTube channel. Read some of Salvatore's work if you can make any sense of it. Maybe you can explain it to me. And also, link below is to my talk on CTMU Singularity. His channel is up and coming and doing some great stuff as well, so check it out. Peace.